can you watch my dog while the movers help me? Can you put my keys under the mat for my roommate? Will a treadmill fit in my dorm room? No, it won't, by the way. Same great experience you could get at many, many schools, but the way it is delivered and you receive it as a student is the unique piece because of the size and the location.
All right, excited to be here on GradTalk MBA by Magoosh. My name's Eric Allen, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the general manager here at Magoosh, and super excited to have a friend of mine and longtime supporter of Access and now Magoosh, Amy Mitson. I will not spend too much time talking about her. I'll let her talk about herself and give her intro. But Amy, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your role at Tuck and maybe either like how you got in the industry or like what you love most about your job, and certainly a fun fact, hopefully one that I don't know.
Oh, God. Well, thank you, Eric and team at Access. Nice to be here and continuing to work with you this year. It's absolutely my pleasure. I love talking about admissions and Tuck and anything I can do to help anyone who's thinking about the process, because I have learned so much. Prior to coming to Tuck, I didn't know anything about the MBA, let alone being in an environment like Tuck that is a top MBA program, unique in its full-time experience. There's so much I did not know, but in this environment was able to learn and grow in very significant ways. I thought I would have left Tuck many years ago, and have thought several times I would have headed somewhere else, but being here for about 20 years, it has been a continuous learning experience with really interesting group of people who are willing to share their experience with me so I can be better and stronger to help future applicants. I think that's a big reason why I'm here. It's absolutely the people, but also the chance to learn and grow, not only about every single thing from A to Z about Tuck. I started my time here in student services and then transitioned to admissions, now learning what it takes to get into the program and be successful here. Again, the learning continues, never a dull moment, always interesting students, faculty, and staff to engage with in a really thoughtful way. So I continue to be here. My fun fact, there's so many. I'm from Rhode Island. You might not know that. So smallest state from Rhode Island.
I did not know that. Where in Rhode Island? Because I went to Brown,
okay,
so
I
do know, and it's only that big.
Okay.
So, yes. So
okay,
where in Rhode Island?
Northern Rhode Island, in Lincoln, Rhode Island. So just about 15 minutes north.
I know Lincoln, Rhode Island.
I ran track and cross country in high school, started my high school track team. My coach brought me to Brown to meet Jackie Joyner-Kersee when she was on that campus. It was amazing. So
wow,
anyway,
wow,
that's
wow.
a way
That is amazing. And what did you run in track?
Everything under the sun. I started with the 800, the 400, and the 1500, and then when I went to college, continued because I was a track team. We were a track team of 2 people in my high school. We didn't have one, and so made a lot of mistakes along the way, but learned how to be a stronger runner. And really, in college, my coach he knew I was going to run cross country, but then he said, okay, well, if you're going to run cross country, you should probably do spring track. And if you're going to do spring track, you need to do winter track. And so I was in for the whole thing and learned how to do the handoff and the relays and run every single distance, and really an 800 and a 1500 meter runner. So those are some really, really fun times.
Okay, so I'm definitely learning a little bit about you today. I didn't know you were a star athlete. I know you would say, well, I don't know if I was a star, but let's just leave it at that. So that's really cool. Excuse me. And didn't know you were from Rhode Island, which is also cool, and know Lincoln quite well. So that's really fun. So one thing that you brought to my attention, I knew you'd been in Tuck for a little while, but I didn't know you kind of worked in a lot of different spaces within the school. How do you think that's kind of helped you become the admissions officer that you are? And like, how do you think that background in all of the other spaces really helps you evaluate candidates?
So our MBA program office, so one big space, but a very comprehensive role where I learned everything about so many things about Tuck, not absolutely everything, there's always more to learn, but that role helped me because I was new to the area, new to the community, and I was in a position to help new students who were just starting at Tuck get situated, get to know the place, get settled in housing, um, get support for their partners and their families. Like, as I was new in the area, I was then also sharing it with new students. And so I was very scrappy and like wanting to find out, okay, what's the best answer to this student's question? Because it was literally, I would get calls in our MBA program office for everything under the sun of like, can you watch my dog while the movers help me? Can you put my keys under the mat for my roommate? Will a treadmill fit in my dorm room? No, it won't, by the way. And so all these questions from new students who are moving to the Upper Valley for the first time and going to start their experience at Tuck. The other incredible benefit was that Tuck was even a smaller place at that time, and there were just no barriers to any interest I had. So I could talk with any faculty member, with any staff member. That's still true to this day, but it was even more so then because we were just, you could just do everything from start to finish when helping a new student get situated in the area. But what I learned, the most important thing was that nobody was off limits to me, from the dean to the top faculty to, the registrar, the facilities manager. If I needed support to get something done for a new student who was coming to Tuck, I was going to get a yes. I was going to get every bit of support I needed. And that has continued to be true. And I think is a very important piece of this experience, and that it is designed for people to be successful. People want to help. And that's something that has had a huge impact on me being here and being able to provide service and information and support to students, whether it was in the MBA program office or now in admissions. I also got to know the curriculum really well. Our first year project experience, helping that get off the ground more than 20 years ago, and it's blossomed into something much, much bigger. So there's a lot there, but that's at the beginning of it, I guess.
All right. So you have like this full view. So this is like going to be definitely a drum answer here. So when you think about like if you had to kind of say this is one of the things that makes Tuck, right? Like, and so many of our candidates will, go through this process and they'll have all these schools in their head and they're like, yeah, they're all the same and I can't really differentiate them. What would you say is the one thing that does differentiate them? Is it that access, that feel where you can get connected to everyone, or is it something else that you think is really what makes Tuck what it is?
All of the MBA programs are designed to deliver the best of everything to every student, right? And so we are similar in amazing and wonderful ways, right? Schools are similar, but the uniqueness of Tuck is the size, without a doubt, and the location. These two things will factor uniquely into a student's MBA experience at Tuck and forever have an impact. So the size, 285 students in each class, and a very accessible community on this one campus in this unique place in the universe that is a little bit different than where most students are coming from pre-Tuck. And so the size, that is going to have a direct impact. You are going to know absolutely everyone, not just in your section, but in your class and in the entire community, and they will know you. That was something that caught me off guard when I first moved here. I was in Washington, D.C. prior to starting my time as an administrator at Tuck, and the city is a little bit more of a anonymous environment, or it can be at times. And here, like my first week on campus, people knew that I was a new employee, just like when a student arrives. They know that the community knows you are a new member of the community and kind of lean in to help you. And so while at first I was like, no, I don't need any help, I'm good. I was like, oh yeah, I do need some help, and I'm gonna take it because I'm gonna be better off for it. So that was a life lesson for me, and that being known in a community, not just by your section or your study group or your most direct faculty, but by all. And then you then have that. So I then had that for the people coming after me. And so that small size, unique location, huge impact on the way the experience is delivered to a student at Tuck. Same great experience you could get at many, many schools, but the way it is delivered and you receive it as a student is the unique piece because of the size and the location.
All right, I'm going to throw something your way that you probably deal with a fair amount, right? So you hear people from, the city, right? New York City or other places that are just like, every time I hear stuff from Tuck, it sounds pretty cool, but like, I'm just not really sure. Like, it's kind of out there, whatever. I know you have these conversations with candidates that are from major cities in the US and around the world. Help us understand like how you would speak to someone who's used to being in, you said you're from DC, I'm in the DC area, DMV, like someone who's coming from a major city. What is the benefit of, you talk about size, you talk about location, help someone understand why that might be beneficial for them to spend 2 years of their time in a smaller environment, in a community like that, a place where they can maybe get away from that and still have access to it after school?
First, I will say, whatever community, dear MBA student you head into, it is a leap of faith. It is a well-informed leap of faith, right? So whether it feels familiar, like maybe a city to you, or somewhat unfamiliar, like being outside of the city here in Hanover, it's a leap of faith, right? But coming here, the uniqueness of that leap you take is that there are no barriers to every opportunity. That is why we exist, to provide you with the absolute best opportunities academically, personally, and professionally while you are at and forward from Tuck. That is why we are here. And so with the different environment, like, it can seem like it is really different, but the uniqueness of the place, and being outside the city, it can feel very different at first, but people can be very comfortable here. You just have to, you do your homework and you kind of step foot on campus before you actually make it official, or in talking with alumni and others, you get to know the place through that measure as well. And you jump into an experience that is kind of just betting on yourself, really taking the opportunity to be in an environment where you can have a different experience. Because, in the experience and words of many students, this is maybe the final time you will be in an academic environment. Why have it be like somewhere where you just were? Same opportunity. You can see that in the career stats, in the academic success students have, in the job placement after. It's no different than their peers in other MBA programs in other locations, but it is the opportunity to be in a unique environment where Tuck grads walk away saying it was the 2 best years of their life, the 2 most unique years of their life, the 2 most transformative years of their life. And I think the environment here adds to that uniqueness and that transformation. But it's no barrier to great opportunities, just a different location.
I love that. So you've talked a lot about the experience, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there who've done some of their research on Tuck and they're interested. What would you say is maybe the hardest thing to articulate about the university, about the experience, that you can't even come close to really speaking on the website and the materials? That's just like the one thing, Amy, that jumps out to you where you're like, we try, but like until you get here, until you experience it, you don't really feel like, what would that one thing be?
It is the power of the community. So while you're here, it's challenging in the MBA. Students are trying to achieve a lot with limited hours in the day, and it's an incredible amount of challenge as you go through this experience, and that hits people in different ways, whether it's academically, professionally, socially, all these things. And you will be supported every single step of the way. Like when I say this experience is designed for you to be successful, I really want anyone listening, thinking about Tuck, to hear that, because that is how it is here. The hardest part is always asking for help, but most times in a close community, people will just find you and help you. And that is the part that I don't know how to communicate that. I've seen it for 2 decades now, and I have heard it from current students, from alumni. So you can talk to an alum who graduated in the 70s and 80s, talk to an alum who graduated in the 2000s or who graduated 2 months ago, and they will have a unique story to share about a time a classmate, community member, faculty member just leaned forward to help them in a way that they never would have imagined. And that is the benefit. It comes back to the close community. And so it's challenging to communicate that, but there will be pieces of this experience that will be challenging to any student, but the entire experience is designed for you to be successful. And that is going to look different for every student in different ways. And that is something that is a guarantee with your experience at and from Tuck, because people continue to, like I said, graduates from 2 months ago, 20 years ago, they continue to reach back to their student community because it is the strongest, and it feels like a family to them. And so that is where they continue to get support decades later from graduating.
That's great. I want to kind of build on that. So you talk about the value of this community. You talk about how Tuck is set up for the candidates to be successful. Can you talk about specific ways in which you support under-resourced and underrepresented candidates, given the fact that it seems like it's almost built for everyone to succeed, regardless of kind of background and resources that they come into the program with? So maybe can you provide some examples of how you think Tuck supports under-resourced and underrepresented groups?
Mm-hmm. From the beginning, if you can't, the community is one thing, we can talk about that, but thinking about how do you afford the MBA and how do you finance it, and any applicant should expect that it will be a combination of things. Some maybe it's personal funds, loans, scholarship. It's always a combination of things. But we have just talking about philanthropy and fundraising at Tuck, and the alumni have made it a focus of theirs over the last 5 years and also in the coming 5 years for increased scholarship dollars for financial aid. We have significantly increased our scholarship budget in the last 5 years, and we are going to continue to strive to do that. We don't want finances to be a barrier from when someone is admitted to Tuck that they can't come because of the dollars and cents aren't working out. So I think the transparency of our financial aid team, their ability to support and counsel students even prior to them being admitted. You do not have to wait to get your questions answered and to understand a budget for the MBA. And then when you are admitted to the program, you will have an understanding of, if you've received a scholarship, what impact that will have. And then the conversation continues with the committee. But we have made significant investment of time and resources around scholarship funding for candidates who are applying to Tuck, and that's been a dean's priority for now going into that we just kind of coming off a big campaign at Dartmouth overall and at Tuck for financial aid, and we will continue to do that. And we've also not raised tuition for the last 4 years. So that doesn't make it easy to afford, but there are resources and support. And then when you are here, support around, someone shared an example with me recently about different things that are offered at schools. And when it comes to supporting a student in the career search, oftentimes the mock interviews and the case prep and those types of things that's some serious training that you go through if you want to make a big career transition. And Some programs are set up differently in that students are paid. A student would pay another student for their time to help do a mock case, and that does not happen here. People freely give their time and energy to support others. If you were to need a tutor during your time in the MBA program, tutors are provided by our MBA program office, and students are not required to pay additional money if they need a tutor. Support from our low-income first-generation student club at Tuck. That comes in the form of social and emotional support, and also engagement with the faculty in the initiatives from LIFT, which is what our students call their club at Tuck. So it starts with financial aid and scholarship. It continues on with conversation with the financial aid team with admissions. It comes into student services and not extra fees when it comes to the support you need in the program. So I'll pause there, and I hope that got to the heart of the question.
No, it did. And I'm glad you went there, because I think all too often, we just talk about kind of programming once you get on campus, but financial support is really the foundation for accessibility, right? So if you don't have that, all of the programs that you have are almost like irrelevant. So thanks for going in that direction. I'm going to kind of zoom us out a little bit away from Tuck for a second and just talk about the general admissions process. So someone listening to this is thinking about applying to school, maybe kind of considering when they should do that. How would you advise candidates to think about how much time they should put aside for this entire process, when they should start thinking about this process, and what they should think about first, right? Like how, would you recommend folks think about admissions in general?
Mm-hmm. So you don't want to rush. I know that people do it in all sorts of different ways, of course, as we all manage our lives and our times uniquely. But this is a big project, and this is a big life decision. And so you want to give yourself some time to not only understand the process and to complete it, but also to reflect as you're going through. Some people will take a year. They'll start or even longer, and start dipping their toe in and attending coffee chats and just glancing at a GMAT prep book or a GRE prep question, or talking to someone they know at work who has an MBA. Because many times when I do speak with candidates and I say, what was the inspiration for the MBA? Many times they'll say, there's somebody at work and they're just like, they have this thing, and there's a presence and there's a leadership capacity there. And I see that, and that's something that I'm aspiring to. And so I asked them about themselves, and they said it was a result of their MBA program. So many times, dear applicant, you have that bit of inspiration, and it comes from others who have that leadership and training specifically from the MBA. And that's why you started to dive into it. But I'd say, if it's a year, if it's 6 months, that may be where your starting point is. If you could give yourself at least 6 months, I think that would be amazing. And I know people do all sorts of different things, and that is fine. But giving yourself some time to understand, one, the nuts and bolts of the application process, which we could say that's the easy part. That's on every school's FAQ that says, here's what you need to fill out. Here's what the requirements are. Okay, great. Read that, and then sit with those FAQs and the details of the application process for, a week or two. Walk around with those details in your head thinking, okay, am I ready to dive into this process? Am I even ready to, revise my resume? And that's going to take time and energy. And so that could be a first step along with your initial idea and inspiration as to why you want the MBA. And then you have to start to get real about the process. Look at a school's essay questions. Do you have the kind of outline of an answer to what that might be for you? Can you answer why MBA? If you cannot answer why MBA, you have to pause and really think about it, because that's I believe that is the foundation for this whole thing, the why. It's not, what you've done is going to factor in, who you've met, how you got inspired, but that real why is something that, one, it can be a differentiator when you're telling your story in the application process, but that why is where I suggest you pause and give yourself some time to understand that for yourself, because everybody's going to have a lot of good reasons for you along the way as to why and why not to do this thing. But when you find out the why for yourself, that's something to hold on to as you go through this process that will take you weeks and months and maybe longer to prepare for. So if you could give yourself 6 months, I think that would be great, but also give yourself time to adjust on that plan. You may be on the path and something interrupts and you think, okay, I'm going to stay on this path toward the MBA, but it's going to take me longer. So I might not apply in round 2 this year. I'm going to apply round 1 next year, but I'm staying on the path. So find out that why for yourself, and then take a look at the details of the process and what it is you need to accomplish that why and what it takes to get to, submitting the application. But, 6 months-ish.
I love you. That was going to be my follow-up question to you. And you nicely wrapped it into it, though. Like, what's the area that is kind of like tends to be underdeveloped, right, with candidates oftentimes? And I think you mentioned it. It's the why, right? Oftentimes, like if you don't have that why or it's not developed, it doesn't matter if you're like, you can write an application or whatever. It will ultimately probably come out that it's not authentically clear why you're going to business school. So you may get off track. You may not be as clear in your application, in your interviews, et cetera. So like, I want to reiterate to the listeners, like what Amy just said is like a mic drop moment. Like if you don't have that why, then you need to pause and go back and really think about it, because that does drive everything that you do going forward. It drives career, it drives your focus in the program and all of that. So thank you for saying that. I thought that was fantastic. Thinking about the application itself, I'm going to force you right now. I know you don't want to say this, but I'm going to force you to say this. If you had to pick an element where you're like, okay, this is like overvalued, like everyone talks about it on the forums or whatever, and this is undervalued. As someone who sits and reads, when you evaluate applications, man, I wish candidates would think more or be more thoughtful about this particular piece. And like, you just hear it all the time. And it's like, yeah, I look at that, but like, it's not nearly as important as the broader audience might think.
Aside from the why, the progression in your career, that's very important, right? Because even if you then come into the application process and your goals are not perfectly formed, I look back at some of the things that you have done up until this date of submitting the application, and that brings me confidence that you are going to continue moving forward no matter where the MBA takes you. So to have that professional experience, to have a resume that says something about you, I think that's very important, because it just is it's another foundational aspect of reading the application to me. Because when I sit down and dial up that application, the resume is the landing pad for me, and that gives me just a broad picture of some of the things that you've done, dear applicant, up until this point. And so whatever you have done, and no one company valued over the other, like whatever the sign is above the door where you walk in or log into every day, it's the content of that experience, because that signals to me that you have something to contribute in the classroom and in your study group. And so I think the professional experience is not to be overlooked. And then what comes from that is also the other voice that comes into the application for you, which is your recommender. Sometimes like applicants don't leave enough time for that, and the recommender can't really provide something specific or helpful under a time crunch. And so it says a lot about an applicant who then has that professional relationship or maybe it's leadership outside of work that also adds to the accomplishment in the resume, but to be able to nicely usher that recommender to submit a quality recommendation form there, that has an impact. So the professional experience, I think, is something that, that may be something that people say, okay, well, I don't know what they're going to say about it, but professional experience is important because it shows a lot about an applicant, no matter what it is, because whatever it is, you're making the most of it. So no matter what industry, no matter where you're working. The other thing that I think applicants may cause applicants a lot of stress are oftentimes essays, and they're reading, revising, reviewing, they want to get it perfect. Don't let that hold you back. Just express yourself, right? I think that's maybe talked about a little bit too much sometimes, but you don't have to have everyone under the sun fine tuning your essays for you. You can speak from the heart, you can share the facts with me, you can share the why in that essay, and then I really start to hear you in the application. And so I think applicants put a lot of pressure on themselves sometimes around the essays, where let yourself freely answer those questions that schools are asking.
Oh, that's great. I think sometimes also with some of the AI tools and admissions consultants and what have you, essays can get sterilized, right? You don't really hear the voice. And I'm sure someone who has your experience probably can tell sometimes when things have been over-engineered. I actually love your comment about recommenders. I want to go back to that. When you think about recommendations, and the challenge sometimes of choosing them, and even more importantly, the challenge of a candidate helping them, I think the word you used was usher, kind of their support, right? What do you look at when you look at recommendations in general? Are you looking at the depth of how they're talking about it? Are you looking at specific examples? Are you looking at scoring grids? And then how would you recommend that a candidate, especially, I've heard before, engineers, they don't really, the recommendations aren't usually as strong because they're engineers, and they just tend to be very matter of fact. How do you help a recommender help the candidate? What advice would you give to a recommender?
And I'm not using a scoring grid. Pick one story, right? That recommender, pick one thing that you went through with your recommender, a project you tried to deliver, whether it was great or not so great. And remind the recommender of this is a story that you could share when a school asks for my strengths and weaknesses, right? Don't be, the recommender doesn't have to shy away from sharing a weakness, but then also how did they see growth in the candidate? So I would say for the applicant, think about one trial, tribulation, success that you connected with that manager on, and they can use that as the basis for their recommendation. And that may help the recommender as well, because maybe they've worked with you for years. Oh my God, what do I choose? And sometimes they may be, taking language from your prior performance evaluation, because there's nothing, that I'm sure that is a common practice, but that's authentically something that, can help that recommender get through the recommendation form. But just pick one story, right? And then they can use that as the foundation for their recommendation. And that may help them get through it more easily, guide them, as they submit it to the schools that you're applying to. So it doesn't have to be, the summation of your whole career, just picking one story. And also on the recommendation form, they can share how they know you, how they've worked with you. And sometimes applicants are concerned about that. Oh, well, they're my second level manager, or I just started working with them, or they now left, the company. They have room to explain that, and we see that consistently. So that's not not a barrier at all to a great recommendation, but maybe helping them focus to deliver the recommendation form on time.
That's great. I love that. Anchor, right? Like it's not about volume, just anchor, something that they can really talk about. Thinking a little bit about test scores. People are anxious oftentimes about test scores. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how Tuck thinks about, the standardized tests and kind of, obviously with a lot going on in different tests and like what tests to take and all of that. Give us your well-rehearsed response on how you think about testing in the admissions process.
Yeah, it is an important factor in a highly competitive process, and it can help tip the scales in your favor, or it can be like another feather on a scale that complements a really strong academic career. And so the test is a component of the process. Schools are asking for different things, so know what you need to deliver for any school that you're applying to. We require a test score or an application for a waiver. So the GMAT or the GRE are the tests that we accept. Candidates take those tests, once if they're lucky, but usually many times candidates across the board taking the tests once, twice, and sometimes more than that. And that's great. It shows your focus and determination and understanding of what it takes to be successful in the admissions process on this factor. It shows that you don't give up easily, no matter where that score goes. So GMAT or GRE are required, or you will be able to submit a testing waiver. So last year we did an experiment with that at Tuck for our round 3 admissions for candidates who were disrupted by tech layoffs. And so people were able to submit a test waiver. This year, the same thing. Anyone will be able to, with an open application, will then be able to submit a test waiver, and you would get a response on that before the applications were due. The details of that will be shared very soon when our application goes live later this month. But what you need to show if you are applying for a test waiver is competency in quantitative areas. So either a 3.5 or better in quantitative or adjacent undergrad or graduate work, 2 years professional experience at a minimum, and be able to, again, demonstrate to the committee quantitative proficiency. And so all of that will be very clear when, when you're, dear applicant, when you're able to see the FAQs about what it takes for the test waiver. But the test waiver is designed for someone with a depth of demonstrated quantitative experience academically and or professionally. And you'll have ways to show that. And so, so there is the answer that's a little less standard than it used to be because we never had a waiver. So we're continuing on with that kind of brief testing waiver that we had for round 3 this year, and it's available for all rounds this coming season.
Well, I'm sure candidates appreciate the flexibility, and I certainly appreciate the clear guidance, right? I think sometimes, the plans can be implemented without clarity. And so just to be clear to the candidates listening, it does not include just because you don't want to take the test, right? So it's very clear that Tuck is really trying to see demonstrated proficiency so that you can be successful in this process. They certainly don't want you to get on campus and fail because you don't have the quantitative proficiency that's necessary in a rigorous program.
Yeah, and just briefly to add, what we learned last year when we did this pilot with the testing waiver was that many applicants were using it as a platform to tell me in essay format why they did not need to take the test. None of those were approved, right? None of those test waivers were approved because that is not a compelling case. The facts of your demonstrated quantitative experience is the compelling case.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. If you didn't bring your homework, Amy doesn't want to hear the excuses. So fabulous. So let's switch to the interview a little bit.
Yes.
So when you think about the interview, what I love about what Tuck is all about, authentically community unique experience and all of that. How do you use the interview to find the candidate that's a good fit at Tuck?
The candidate is able to relax and tell their story, right? So when you're able to relax in an interview, that signals a little bit that you have thought about this and you are confident about this. The way you show up in the MBA interview signals a little bit to me of like that forecasting, like what will this candidate look like when they're having a coffee chat with the dean, walking the halls and meeting alumni, going out and representing our brand when they're meeting with future employers. And so it's the opportunity for the candidate to showcase professionalism, confidence, and focus on Tuck. It's really great to see in an interview that someone is authentically interested in their MBA here. And so you do not have to love and know everything about Tuck to come off as a compelling candidate in the interview. You want to be sure of yourself, why you want the MBA, and why, with the research you've done, you think Tuck would be a great place for you to accomplish that, right? And so it's drawing an authentic connection. Hey, I'm this type of person interested in the MBA because of this, and I think I can achieve my goals with everything that Tuck has to offer. And also, I would be a great community member because of fill in the blank, right? And so the interviewer is going to take you through a series of questions that the interviewer is looking for ways that you connect with the admissions criteria, which are smart, accomplished, aware, and encouraging. So the interviewer works through questions that are not prescribed. Any question that they want can be asked. They will only see your resume, and they will be looking for to understand you and why you want to come to Tuck. So it's making authentic connections to the community, sharing stories about ups and downs in your career. I think that piece of confident humility is something that is important here. It's a small community where your strengths and weaknesses are easily seen and shared among a close network of your peers while you're in the MBA. So if you can show a little bit of that confident humility in your interview, like, hey, I did this really well. Don't be afraid to say I did this really well. And then say, I have no idea how to do this, and I hope Tuck can help me with that. That is great, because that, again, is you showing up for real in your interview, much like I hope you do in the essays, which we talked about earlier. But the interview is an opportunity to authentically connect and just bring your experience to life. It's the time that you have to really speak for yourself in person to someone who is going to represent your interview conversation to the committee.
Oh, fabulous. So we've talked about a couple different components of the application process, but we really haven't tied it all together. So can you walk a candidate through what the admissions process is like at Tuck, and how does an application flow? Who sees it? How's it evaluated? Maybe even times when the most challenging time for you, or really trying to figure out these last few candidates. Just help us understand kind of how this whole process works.
So I'll just put myself in the time frame of round one admissions. So the applications are received in September for round one, and then the decisions go out in early December for round one applicants. That is quite a number of weeks. In that time, the application is read several times. So it, again, handled in a queue. And so as the first reader, I go in, I randomly select the applications and get a batch of 10, say. And I'm going in, I open up that application, go through all the components of it. Again, I start with the resume, kind of trying to get a foundation for who am I meeting today. Go through all the components of the application. I am evaluating everything around our 4 criteria and trying to find those connections to smart, accomplished, aware, and encouraging throughout your application. I make notes on any aspect of the application that the highlights, the things to work on, what I think might be a standout when I'm comparing applicants later in committee, what I think might be a challenge for a particular applicant. I make my final notes. I put that application back into the queue. A second reader on my team goes in to look at that application. And I can be a first reader sometimes, I can be a second reader sometimes. In the first read of the application, sometimes we have the interview, sometimes we don't. So it depends on how things are coming in. The second reader will do the same thing. They are going to go in. They'll be able to see my notes. They'll dive into the application as they see fit to do, and then it all filters through to a final reader, to a committee discussion, to then, as you point out, those final weeks before decisions are released, when the committee is meeting to discuss every single applicant who is in contention for being admitted. And it is you come into the committee room, you go through your whole day, then you go home and you are I am still thinking about applicants and thinking, okay, do we need to talk about them again? Do we need to bring them back into the discussion? Is there something, that we didn't discuss? And so, again, there is an art and a science to this work that we are doing in the committee. And you, applicants, are real people and alive to us throughout this process. And so we are taking great care to consider every measure to understand, how can we admit this person? And so kind of moving applications through the process to the final decision. And it does take a long time for you to receive your application decision, but we are using every minute for the benefit of your evaluation. So think about all the time that you put into this process. It's being invested by the admissions committee on the other side before decisions go out. And so there are many eyes on your application. There are, many times where we pause to seek additional information, or sometimes you are sharing more information with us. Midway through the process, someone could share a new test score. Someone could provide an additional piece of information to me. Everything that you share, we are working to incorporate that and make sure we have a full picture of your candidacy before final decisions go out to you. So I think it's comprehensive. I know there's a lot of integrity in our process. There are very different perspectives represented around the table in our admissions committee. And I think that benefits everyone who applies to the program.
I want to ask you, because it's such a challenging and intense time, like from September through, March or what have you, as you're evaluating these applications, how do you think about all of the other stakeholders at Tuck, whether it's professors, career services, you have deans, you have a lot of people who are knocking on that door there behind you who want to talk about different things. Do you compartmentalize that and say, look, I take in the information, I make adjustments with the team, we talk about it, and then we do our thing? Or is it more of something you think about actively throughout the process of how you want a candidate to fit in? How does this fit in with the broader strategic goals of where we want to move forward? I'd love to know how you think about that.
It's all the things, right? So I absolutely think about, and we ask along the way, if I am looking at a candidate who I think would be an incredible contributor to the community, everything looks good here, but I'm looking at their professional experience and I think, okay, this is what they say their goals are. This is what the experience is. I'm going to check in with career services to say, can you and career services is not going to have the final decision in the admissions process. They don't. But they are colleagues here that as soon as I admit someone, they are going to start working closely with that person along their job search path. And I want to know that, I want to check in with my career services team to understand, can this person get to their goals? Is this someone I think we've worked with a candidate like this before. I think it'll be a tough job search, but I'm confident that the candidate, has the resilience. They've shown me other things in their application that made me think like, yes, this is going to be a challenging job search, but they're showing me the stuff that it takes to get through a challenging job search. What do you think? And so I'll do a little bit of that gut check with career services. This is a community where, I'm going to admit someone, and then the community is then going to help take care of them as they get through their MBA. And so I do that check with career services. I will do a check-in with our deans in our MBA program office to say, I'm seeing this in the person's application, and I believe we can fully support them as they go through the MBA program. Can you take a look at this? And so we have experts all around us at Tuck, and while they are not going to have the final say in your decision, I want to gain support and understanding from staff members and deans at Tuck, so you are coming in with the full support of this place behind you once you're admitted.
All right. I feel like I could run another hour of just me asking you questions, but I know we can't do that. That's unfair. But let's jump into our fact versus fiction round. Because I'm having such a good time, I'm running behind, so we'll have to kind of narrow this down. But I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to kind of say fact, fiction, and then give a short kind of answer as to why. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome. First question is, you have the best chance of getting into school by applying in round one.
Fiction, right? So you have the best chance of getting into school when you're ready. I know candidates hate to hear that, but when you're ready means you have thought about the process, kind of you've lined up everything that you need. You've read through the FAQs, like you have a good copy of your resume, like you are able to devote some time. So that could come in round two. That could come in round three. I have been doing this for a long time. I have seen candidates all throughout the process. There's always room for a strong candidate. Don't just focus on round one. Don't let that stop you.
Awesome. Fact or fiction? Tuck wants a minimum amount of work experience to make sure that they can add value to the program. This is a tougher one, Amy. I start you off easy, but this is a little tougher.
I say mostly fact, if I can provide that answer, because the pool of applicants is the majority are bringing at least 2 years full-time work experience. And if you only have 6 months full-time work experience and you're compared to somebody else with 2 years, we may ask you to come back in the next year just because of the competitiveness of the pool and the other professional experience. So it's wonderful. While technically there is no minimum, you could be outshined by the pool if you have significantly less experience. So having 2 years is a good spot to be in. So I'd say I can't give a perfect answer with that, but it's great to have some.
It's factish.
It's factish.
All right. So this may be another factish. We'll have to see. You should only write your optional essay if you have a whole to explain in your application. Mostly
a fact. So the other fact is the majority of the applicant pool does not use the optional essay. We've also added things within the application that help you explain along the way. Most times people want to use that optional essay many times to explain a work gap or something professionally. You have that opportunity to do that within the employment section. So there are other places where you don't have to go to the optional essay. But again, applicant, it is yours. You really have to use good judgment here. And if it is not able to be explained in the application, then definitely use it. Awesome. And our last one is fact or fiction, the MBA is less valuable in a digital economy. Fiction. The digital economy is still run by people. Yes, I know the machines are there, but people are still a part of this. And at the highest levels in any company, leadership is a component. So I believe the MBA is more valuable than ever, because it's not a theoretical experience here. You get some incredible training, not just in the academics, but also in your awareness of yourself, your leadership capabilities. They're being tested every single day in the MBA program. And that is what will serve you the best at the highest levels and what you want to achieve, leaving the MBA, what you want to achieve in your career. I think that the leadership and the learning, it's not an accident. And it's required no matter what kind of economy we have.
Be careful. Watch your back, Amy, because this transcript is now online and the machines are coming after you when they take over.
But if I tell the machines I'm more valuable, won't they repeat me?
Maybe they will. Okay, we're moving into rapid fire round. So thank you for that. I'm going to say a phrase, and you are going to tell me the first thing that comes to mind in one word or less, or because we're close friends, 2, 3, or 4 words, whatever it takes. So are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. You're on the hot seat, Amy Mitson. The first one is the perfect applicant.
Doesn't exist.
Oh, you're good at this. Wow. Number 2, the feeling of getting accepted into your dream program.
Woo. Yes. Yes. I bet on myself. Yes.
Yes, I love this. Wow, you are in the top tier of this. The GMAT.
Woo. Take your time. Get it done.
Okay, admissions myths.
I don't know how to answer that. So many. We'll tell you, right? If you have a question, ask.
Ask. I love that. Ask. The top 20.
Subjective. What is your top 20?
Also like that. Tuck.
Oh, was that?
That's the question for the last one. What comes to mind when I say tuck?
Love, community.
Love that. All right. So we're almost done, except I want to ask you a question that I'm really curious about. You've been doing this for a minute. You think about, you try different things each year, and some things worked and some things don't. What's kind of the one thing that maybe you learned or you take away that you hold tight, that you're like, I learned this and I go by this no matter what? All the things that can change, whether it's technology or the candidates or whatever. What's that North Star? You talked about the why for candidates. What's that one thing that you've learned over the years that you hold really tight, and you live by that, and you really believe in that as you execute your job?
The significant opportunity. Like, this place has changed my life and how I think about work and life, and knowing what I know now. I wish that I would have had this opportunity. And so I just this is a real opportunity to transform yourself personally and professionally. And it's who even knew this? I didn't even know this thing existed 20 years ago. I had no idea. And knowing what I know now, it's changed my life in ways. And for students who go through this program, it's 10 times that. So it is a real opportunity for yourself. And if you even have an inkling that this could be for you, don't give up on the thought that this would be the next great opportunity for you.
That's fabulous. Amy, how do folks who are listening today get in touch with Tuck? What's the best way for them to connect?
Hopefully we're easy to find, but me, just amy.mitson at tuck.dartmouth.edu. A great way for applicants. I'll mention 2 things. There are so many events, so too many events. So just Tuck events. Join us anywhere, virtually or in person. Tuck Pathways, that shows student journeys, which can be really helpful as you, an applicant out there, thinking, is there anybody like me who ever went through this program? Tuck Pathways are great perspectives. And also the Tuck 360 blog, where the admissions committee provides a lot of great insight into the criteria, into the process, into other ways to connect. So the Tuck 360 blog is a treasure trove of information for any applicant.
Awesome. Amy, we could, you and I could talk for hours. I'm actually happy that we were able to keep it within an hour. We learned so much from you. Thank you so much. As always, you're so authentic, well thought out answers. Really appreciate the insight that you gave to our listeners. Until next time, thanks for listening to GradTalk MBA podcast. You can find us at GradTalk on TikTok. And learn more about the admissions and GMAT and GRE products at Magoosh.com. Amy, thank you so much for joining. We look forward to seeing a lot of applications coming your way, and we will certainly see you on the next podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to GradTalk MBA by Magoosh. If you enjoyed this episode, please like or subscribe this podcast wherever you're listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.